What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. This is Phillies Stoplight on Pattison. We have reached the All-Star break. The Phillies barely held on, but they avoided a sweep Sunday in San Diego. And it kind of reminded you that in this road trip in general, kind of reminded you that while the Phillies will enter the All-Star break in first place in the NL East, they have some clear issues on this team that need to be fixed if they're going to ultimately make a deep playoff run and get over the hump and win a World Series this year. The biggest of those, of course, is the bullpen. The Phillies, Christopher Sanchez went 7 1/3 Sunday, and then Orion Kerkering and Matt Strahm both got the job done, but it was a little shaky, and those are arguably your two most trusted relievers. So the good news, if you're someone interested in the Phillies making a major move in the bullpen, is that this past week, Matt Gelb of The Athletic reported that, quote, the Phillies sound more willing to trade bigger prospect chips for controllable big leaguers, especially a shutdown late inning reliever. Now, he did mention that the Phillies continue to not be willing to discuss Andrew Painter, but it sounds like in the right situation, pretty much anybody else in the farm system, that would be Aiden Miller, whoever, would be available in a potential trade. And I kind of narrowed it down to 4 names that fit this bill. Now, there's others, and Gelb specifically mentioned the AL Central, and we're going to look at three of the 4 guys we look at are from the AL Central. But I also added in Felix Bautista of the Orioles. He 2 years ago was the Mariano Rivera Award winner as the best reliever in the American League, but then missed all of last season recovering from Tommy John surgery. Got off to a little bit of a slower start, but he's rounded into form as we get closer to the All-Star break here. A 2.41 ERA and 18 saves this year. Additionally, he has 2 more years of team control after this. The one thing I would say is that whether Mike Elias goes down as a great GM or not remains to be seen, but he is someone that is a great talent evaluator in my mind, young talent specifically, and it would worry me a little bit if he is looking at your farm system and says, oh, this guy is really undervalued. Like, what are you missing that he's seeing? And do you maybe think twice about giving up who he wants to give up if you were to make that trade? Now, beyond Bautista, the other 3 guys, like I mentioned, are in the AL Central. We'll begin with the biggest name of them all, and that's Emmanuel Clase. Last year had one of the great seasons a reliever has ever had, a 0.61 ERA, finished 3rd in Cy Young voting, which is really a remarkable accomplishment for a relief pitcher. He's got a 3.05 ERA this season, so he hasn't been as sharp, but he's been really, really good since April. He's going to make $6.4 million next season, and then for 2027 and 2028, he has $10 million club options. I mean, when you think about that, you're talking about on top of this year where he's making like $4.5 million, over the next 3 seasons, he's going to make $26.4 million. If Emmanuel Clase was a free agent after this year, you'd be looking at something like 5 years and $100 million. To get him for 3 years and $26.5 million, like that can be your second best reliever. Now, he wouldn't be because you'd be giving up resources, but that amount of money, you would still have wiggle room potentially to add another reliever, or if someone emerges in your system or that's currently in your bullpen and develops into a star reliever alongside him, you would be able to keep those 2 together because Class A's contract is so team friendly. The other big name is Johan Duran of the Minnesota Twins. Duran's got a 1.49 ERA this season, 73 saves in parts of 4 MLB seasons. He's under control for 2026 and 2027 through arbitration, so you would have him for this year, and then additionally 2 more pennant races. It worries me a little bit, guys that are flamethrowers, and you're talking about making this type of investment in, because you're giving up prospect capital and then you'd be paying them through arbitration a decent chunk of money. And, you know, the elbow can only, or in the shoulder and whatever, can only throw 100 miles per hour so many times. So he's an incredible show. If you've seen his introductions in Minnesota, and then obviously once he comes into the game, he's a lights out reliever. I just worry with some of these guys that throw 100, 101, 102 on a consistent basis that it's a ticking time bomb. And it's one thing if you sign a guy like that to a 1-year deal. It's another thing when you're talking about giving up what would be one of the biggest trade packages in the history of the team, giving that up and then you're banking on this guy being an anchor of your bullpen. Griffin Jax, his teammate on the Twins, is one of the more interesting names here. He's got the second highest WAR among relievers since the start of the 2022 season, which I think would surprise some people, but the only guy who's been ahead of him in that category, according to Fangraphs, is Clase. He's got a 4.02 ERA this year, which obviously isn't good for a reliever, but a 3.04 expected ERA and a 1.90 FIP. Both of those, A, suggest that he's been unlucky, and B, lead you to believe that better results are coming after the All-Star break for him. So I wouldn't... It's hard to look at the ERA for relievers because obviously when they're having great seasons, it's super low and it's really impressive. But you can have a few bad outings that really throw off your whole season and you don't pitch enough as a reliever to overcome that. So Jax to me is someone that's really interesting. Ultimately, I think Clase is probably the best value, but he might also be the guy that costs the most. Over on Bleacher Report, I wrote about this. I think you're talking about Aiden Miller, Mick Abel, and then Gene Cabrera, something like that, headlining a deal, and there may even be more on top of that. That's a lot to give up. I mean, Aiden Miller, you think is going to be a pretty good shortstop or third baseman. Mick Abel, I don't know. I see him more as a middle to the back end of the rotation guy, but you're still a guy that has 6 years of control, a guy that was a first-round pick that does throw in the high 90s. You're giving that up. And then Gene Cabrera is another arm in the system that's pretty good. So you'd be giving up a lot for Clase. And one of the reasons Dave Dombrowski has said in the past that he's hesitant to make major moves for relief pitchers is because they're so volatile year to year, and that's true. The thing is, though, the Phillies are in a situation right now where, A, they're in the back half, maybe the last year of a World Series window, and their bullpen is in such bad shape that they're almost forced to do this. And the crazy part is they could make a trade like this, and I'm still not even sure the bullpen's good. You get Clase, Duran, Jax, any of those three, Bautista also, any of them, you're going to be significantly better in the bullpen. And you will have Jose Alvarado starting on August 19th for the rest of the regular season, but not in the playoffs because of the suspension. So you would have a better bullpen, significantly better, but I still don't know that you would have a good bullpen. We don't know if Ranger Suarez or Jesus Luzardo goes to the bullpen, how they're going to pitch. Matt Strahm has not pitched as well as he has last year. Orion Kerkering is still a little bit of an adventure, although he's probably been their best reliever this season. Jordan Romano has not panned out. So, I get the idea of trying to fix this with a major move, and that might be the right decision. But even after that, you're still not guaranteed to have a very good bullpen, and that's the situation you're in right now. The other reality is that if you spend so many resources on a closer, it leaves you thin to do other things on the roster. Now, the starting pitching is in a very good spot, even though the number 5 spot's been in flux a little bit lately. The top 4 is as good as you're going to get. But the lineup has serious issues, and I don't know how you can have watched the Phillies over the last month, particularly on the road this past weekend in San Diego, when they were in Houston. I don't know if it was in the last month, but when they were in Pittsburgh, that also, and think that this lineup is ready to win a World Series. This is a bad year to need hitters, and offense is down throughout the sport. Dave Dombrowski has correctly pointed out both of those realities, but far too frequently this season, this team has been unfun to watch play baseball. It was a struggle over the weekend, specifically yesterday, and really outside of that 13-run outburst, this West Coast series. You are so reliant on the trio of Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, and Bryce Harper, and if one of them doesn't hit a home run or have 4 hits in a game, you're not in a good spot. You're getting nothing at second base from Bryson Stott offensively. Edmundo Sosa hits lefties but not righties, so he's not really like an everyday option. Nick Castellanos and Alec Boehm have had moments but have underperformed what you needed and what you expected from them coming into the season. And I'm not against the idea, whether it's after the All-Star break or after the trade deadline, of bringing up Justin Crawford. But it can't just be you're bringing up a 21-year-old that hits for a lot of average but isn't like a power guy. When you're a team that needs power, your only move cannot be bringing up a guy that's hit 2 home runs at AAA this season. So I think bringing up Crawford and pushing Marsh to left field, that could be part of it. But I still look at whether it's Eugenio Suarez or taking a risk on a guy that's having a down year like Luis Robert, Adolis Garcia, whoever. This team desperately needs another guy that can hit 4th or 5th. And it's great if you go out and get a star closer, but I don't think that alone makes you a legitimate team that can go on a run and win a World Series this year. And I know there's not one great team. Everybody has flaws. Everybody always has flaws just about every year. I get all that, but I'm watching half of this season, more than half of the season of this lineup. I don't feel like this is a World Series caliber lineup right now. Finally, All-Star Game Tuesday. There's been a lot of consternation, and rightfully so in my mind, on it. I wanted to go over some of my ideas, and I wrote a full article on Pattison, so check that out, about how to fix the All-Star Game, because you have Christopher Sanchez doesn't end up pitching because he pitches Sunday. Ranger Suarez got offered to be a replacement, but ultimately chose rest, and I think that's the best case for the Phillies, and it's the best case for him in a contract year. But it's still, I mean, he's deserving of being in the All-Star Game, so it's disappointing not to see him. Zach Wheeler, we don't know like an exact reason why, other than that he wanted to rest in the All-Star Game. I wonder if he had been the pick to start, whether it would have been different, but he's out. And you have Jacob Misiorowski on the Brewers, who has been electric. I feel badly for him that he's in this situation, but they added him to the All-Star Game Friday night, and rightfully so. There was a great story by Matt Gelb in The Athletic, and he was among other reporters that spoke to different people on the team who lambasted the decision to have him in the All-Star Game. And I think it's been, and really it was less about that decision specifically and more about him being in over Christopher Sanchez and Ranger Suarez. And we've since learned that there were some extenuating circumstances. Suarez turned it down, Sanchez pitching on Sunday. The Phillies ultimately did pay him his all-star bonus anyway, and deservedly so, especially after how you saw he pitch yesterday. But to have a guy who's made 5 starts in his MLB career be in the All-Star Game, it's kind of a joke. And again, it's not a diss to Misiorowski, but you've made 5 starts. Like, I thought it was appropriate to have Paul Skeens in the All-Star Game last year, whether he should have started or not. It was clear he had been dominant for enough of a stretch to be in the All-Star Game. Misiorowski just hasn't. And I think maybe I have this idea in my head of what the All-Star Game was supposed to be, and I need to grow up and stop believing in mythical things. But like, when I was a kid, I felt like the All-Star Game, and even within the last 10 years, when I was not a kid anymore, I felt like there was like a magic to the All-Star Game, that even though we knew this was an exhibition, guys still took it seriously, the league still took it seriously, and now you have guys taking selfies in the game, and the pitcher doing in-game interviews, and guys getting in that have made 5 starts in their MLB careers. And maybe I'm sounding like an angry person, and I know that there's a contingent of people that just think it's an exhibition, who cares? I'm not one of those people, and some of the changes I would make to try and improve the game and get it back on track, I would remove the requirement to have an all-star on every team. I think it's this fake idea that, let's take the 2017 Phillies, for example, who obviously were not a good team, especially in the first half. And Pat Neshek that year actually pitched really well, so you can argue he maybe would have deserved it anyway. But he got in as the lone Phillies all-star representative, and this is not a diss of him in any way, because he pitched really well that season and had a nice MLB career. But let's say the Phillies hadn't had an all-star that season. Are the ratings any different in Philly? Like, some of these teams that you kind of force an all-star in for, are there really people in, let's say, Miami or wherever, that they have an all-star just because every team is required to have one, that are like, well, I wasn't going to watch this all-star game, but now that Pat Neshek might come in and pitch in the 7th inning, I got to get to a TV. I think that's a fake idea. No more ceremonial picks either. Like, I think Craig Kimbrell might have been one the other year, but he was pitching like borderline well enough to be in it. Him and Kenley Jansen both got their 400th save, so they got added. I don't like that. Clayton Kershaw got added this year. I think that's wrong. And I would imagine he'll pitch early in the game over somebody that's been that's pitched well enough to be deserving of that. That's wrong in my opinion. Pujols, Cabrera, they got in late in their career. We don't need the league to put in these guys to basically give us one more chance to thank them for their career or for some accomplishment. They'll be in the Hall of Fame. They'll get their thanks there. They'll get thanks whenever it is their final season or their press conference or whatever. They'll get it there. You don't deserve to be in the All-Star game. And now history is going to say Clayton Kershaw was an 11-time All-Star, and this year is viewed no differently than any of the first 10 when he made it on merit, as opposed to this year where you just can't make the case he made it on merit. I would also lengthen the All-Star break because while I understand Zach Wheeler and Ranger Suarez not wanting to rest up, or I understand them wanting to rest up, it kind of sucks when the best guys, especially pitchers, are not in the All-Star game. So what we need to give players a chance to spend some time with their family, rest their bodies, but also still compete in this game. So what I would say is either this past weekend, you take that off and it's time off, or you take next weekend off and maybe you even push the All-Star break back or the All-Star game back to Wednesday or Thursday, and then you eliminate the problem of guys pitching on Sunday can't pitch in the game. Whatever it is, I think it's fair to lengthen the All-Star break because if you're someone that's in the game, in the Derby, whatever, you really don't get any time off. I remember a few years ago the Phillies, the All-Star game was in Seattle and the Phillies coaching staff was in it, any of the players, and it's just like, you don't want to say it's not an honor. It is an honor, but you're flying to the exact opposite end of the country. It's not a break when you're doing that. So that's one thing. And then my final thought, and I know this is controversial, make it count for something. I liked it. Maybe it's because one of my first All-Star games I remember was the 2002 All-Star game when it ended in a tie, and that was a disgrace. And then for whatever it was, 13 or 14 years after that, they made the All-Star game count for home field advantage. And I think we massively overrate what home field advantage is in the World Series. Like 2019, the road team won every single game, including Game 7 of the World Series. 2016, the Cubs won Game 6 and 7 of the World Series on the road. Even the Phillies a couple years ago came back to Citizens Bank Park with a 3-2 lead in the NLCS, and they lost Game 6 and 7 at home. But while I think we overrate what home field advantage is, it's something, and it gave guys kind of a motivation to try. And like, if home field advantage in the World Series is on the line, is Zach Wheeler dropping out of this game? I don't know. I mean, because that could directly impact the Phillies. Is Ranger Suarez deciding, you know what, I need to pitch in this game because there's a chance that this decides whether Game 7 of the World Series is at home or on the road? I don't know. I mean, maybe like I said, maybe I just need to accept that this is an exhibition and it's more for kids or whatever. I want this to be played like an actual baseball game. I don't want it to be a gimmick. It's a gimmick to a degree, but I want it to be like an actual game. And that's the one thing that always stood out from the Pro Bowl and the NBA All-Star game is that when you watch this, you felt like all the best players were on the field and taking this seriously. And I think we're getting more and more away from that, and it's becoming a joke. And I don't want to see that. So those are my thoughts heading into the All-Star game. Check out everything on Pattison. We'll have draft coverage, trade rumors coverage, All-Star game coverage, and we will be back on Friday. Not that we're going anywhere in the meantime, but we will be back on Friday when the Phillies are back as well.